Tyler Pazik, take two. Thanks for joining me.
No problem, man.
We attempted this several months ago and recorded it on my cell phone, as you know, and we didn't get any shot because my camera wasn't rolling. So we got our practice run out of the way, but thanks for joining back up with me.
Yeah, no problem, man.
So we're going to dive right into this because we got a lot to talk about. It's an exciting time for you right now as well, and we're going to get to that here in a little bit. But first, tell the audience who you are, what you do, kind of the Cliff Notes version of your story and what you do.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously my name's Tyler Pazik. I'm a mental performance coach. So I basically do sports psychology with pros and college players and high school athletes, really all ages, but mainly college and several pro athletes as well. And when it comes to like mental performance, how I got started was I went to TCU, got my master's in sports psychology, and before that I was a strength coach. I was actually a strength coach for a high school and a college, and I was also a baseball coach, and I was working from like 6 a.m. to basically 10 p.m. like every day, 6 days a week, and I'm like, all right, there's got to be a better way than this. And I loved teaching the physical side of things, but I really enjoyed teaching the mental side of things even more. So I'm like, oh man, I wonder if you could like, you know, make a living doing this. And so I looked up sports psychology, and then, you know, the rest was history. I went to TCU and started my own business, the Pazik Performance Group. And yeah, now I get to travel a lot too, which is awesome. Get to travel all around to work with University of Oklahoma, University of Florida, Harvard, so it's really all over the place. I'd probably need to pick up a couple more clients here in Arizona, so that way I'm not traveling as much.
Hey, but you got that van, so you're good.
Yeah, so it's a lot of fun.
For those that, when I reference the van, it's a travel van. It's not like a creepy van. It's a really cool van.
Yeah.
Now, as a player, so Tyler and I played at Indiana State together. As a player, were you doing some of the things that you're doing currently now with clients, or is this all things that you learned, like, some of the things that you're currently telling your clients?
I mean, now that I've gotten into it, I look back on my career and I'm like, oh, dang, I was definitely doing some of these things, but I didn't realize I was doing it back then. So like, for instance, like my mom, when I was telling her about this thing that I call a release, so it's like if you throw a bad pitch, or maybe you have like unproductive thoughts going on, or you just have to release that last thing that happened, or maybe you're even worried about the future and it's just not productive towards you executing the next play or pitch, then you do a release, and there's usually physical action that's associated with it. So when I told my mom about that, she was like, oh, you had a release when you were pitching? I'm like, oh, really, what was it? And she said, whenever you threw a bad pitch, you'd go back to the mound and you'd wipe away where the landing area, almost like you were mad at the mound. And I'm like, oh, that's so interesting. I wish I knew that I did that so I could be more intentional about it back then. But yeah, that was one thing. Another thing was like my dad. He was super competitive, and we'd play golf and darts a lot. And one thing he'd always say is like, oh, like, don't let the game beat you. And now I do talk about, it's like, don't let the game beat you. Like, it's against you and the game. It's not me versus Skyke, it's me versus myself and me versus the game. And so he would always tell me that. And back when I was like 12 years old, I'd get like pissed off at my dad. I'm like, Dad, stop it. I'm just so frustrated with the game. But now that's what I talk about. It's like, okay, like, it's really you not being in control of yourself at the end of the day. So those are just like two examples.
So what do you tell guys when you say release then? Is that different for each player, or is it the same process for everybody?
I mean, the overarching principle's the same, but it's individualized to them, like whatever they like to do. Like some hitters like to step out and like redo their batting glove. Some guys like to hit their cleats. Some guys like to move their helmet around, right? So it's that physical action that's linked to like, okay, what am I thinking about mentally right now? What's the self-talk going on here to help me like get over what just happened or what might happen in the future and get back to like the present moment?
So give me maybe an example as a pitcher and as a hitter in terms of that release process and connecting it with the physical action, but also what you're telling them and what they should be thinking about.
Mm-hmm. So, well, to get there, you really have to understand your routine first, like from pitch to pitch. So, like, say your routine is you step up on the mound, take a deep breath, and then you get the sign, you tell yourself, all right, fastball away, right here. And then say you miss it and you like spike it or something like that. Then this is where the release comes into play. So maybe you go to the back of the mound and you either like rub up the ball or you swipe away the mound and like clean off the rubber. And then, so that's your release. During that process, you're like, all right, just spike the ball, whatever, like next pitch right here. And then you wipe it away, you get on the mound, now you're back into your regular routine of like, okay, you get the sign, breath, tell yourself what you want to do, and then go ahead and execute. And then as a hitter, so this might be like, say you take a fastball right down the middle and you froze, and you should have hit it like, 450 dead center. And so then you get out of the box and you might be like, oh, dang, man, I should have absolutely crushed that one right there. And so that's linked to maybe you put your bat down and you redo your batting glove. So that's the physical action, and then that's you releasing that last pitch. And then you get right back into your regular routine, put your right foot in, maybe you look at the barrel, take a deep breath, and now you're telling yourself, all right, line drive center field, or like line, I know Freddie Freeman thinks about like line drive over the shortstop's head, or Tatis thinks about like, all right, like gap to gap right here, like right center, send it out there.
So it's really not, I guess sometimes maybe for myself as a player, I always thought like releasing had a lot to do with breath work. Mm-hmm. So I hear you say like but it's not a main focus. It's more just having a physical response to something that in hindsight is the game is speeding up, right? Because usually if you're having to release, is it always because the game's speeding up, or is it just because your head isn't where it's supposed to be?
That is the key. It's because your head isn't where it's supposed to be. Sometimes that means that the game is speeding up. Sometimes it means that like it's going too slow. It's really like what's going on for you in that moment. And then in terms of like the breath, that's just another physical action. The reason it's such a good one is because, obviously there's a lot of good things linked to the breath, but it's just a physical action that you're linking to like what you're thinking about. So you take a deep breath, and then you tell yourself, all right, like this pitch right here.
I don't know if I've ever asked you this. I was told to find, this is what I was told by somebody, probably not a professional, back in high school, is when you get to the baseball field, find something, an image, something that you can spot out, and when stuff is hitting the fan, find that image, and it's going to remind you of a good time in your life. I tried that, and I struggled with that because, like, let's just be honest, when you give up 2 or 3 doubles and walk a guy and hit a guy and give up a home run, like staring,
that's a bad inning.
staring, I'm just using, there probably was an ending like that in my career, several,
yeah.
But like picking out a sign and thinking about a happy time in my life didn't really like work for me. Yeah. So like, you're more or less saying, okay, the physical action.
Well, the focal point is another one that you can do. Obviously, that didn't work for you. And this is where the individualized component comes into play. Is like the focal point doesn't work for you, but maybe wiping away the dirt on the mound would work for you. Or maybe stepping off and taking your hat off, and then when you put it back on, you're like, all right, like we're locked back in here. Like you take your hat off, you release, and then you put it back on. Focal points work great for some people. So again, it's just figuring out like what is the thing that they like to do that helps them. And it doesn't. And also another point of it is like you want to bring awareness to what you're thinking about. So if you like gave up a double, walked a guy, gave up a home run, like all that stuff, it might be literally sitting there and looking at that focal point out there, that sign that you have picked out, and instead of thinking about like, oh, like trying to get into your happy space, like being like, all right, well, just gave up 2 big hits and walked a guy, like that freaking sucks. Well, like what can we do about it? Nothing. All right, well, let's get back to the next pitch then. So it's like having that actual intentional, conscious conversation with yourself. That's the key. If you just try to like pile positivity on top of what you're really thinking about, and you never bring awareness to, or you never bring that to the conscious mind, then it's always going to be there in the background. And I feel like that's kind of why it probably didn't work for you, was because you were still thinking about the double and the home run instead of just being like, okay, like that happened, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, it was really hard to go from I'm getting my rear end kicked to thinking about my dog or cat at home, like that,
for sure.
Whatever I had at the time in my life. Now, I'm curious to get your opinions. Pitch clock now has been in 2 years. Do you feel like, a hitter and or a pitcher in that regard, because now there's so many rules in place, right? You got to be in the box, or pitcher has to be ready to go, to where they can still have this process even with a pitch clock in today's game.
Oh yeah, it's definitely possible. Now, if you're going from no pitch clock to a pitch clock, right, you might have had one routine that was longer, and then now with the pitch clock, you aren't able to get in that full, long, drawn-out routine. It's going to be shorter. Maybe you only have time for like one of those physical actions. Maybe you only have time for looking at that focal point for a quick second instead of sitting there and thinking for like a long time. You really don't have that option anymore. So, but the thing is like it's a habit that you're trying to put into place. And so the more you do it, the more habitual it become. And like what happens with habits is that like when you're implementing a habit, your brain is kind of clicked on the whole time, and you really have to like lock in on like doing the physical actions and really being aware of what you're thinking about. But then over time, like once the habit is established, your physical routine that you're going through, then your brain, as soon as you start going through it, your brain actually like chills out and goes into this like calmer, more relaxed state where like now instead of focusing on me doing right foot, left foot, bat swing, coming up, right now you can be like, all right, like line drive center field right here.
Now, how long does it take somebody to find their routine? Because for myself personally, it took me several years, almost like to the tail end of my career. So like, what do you feel like is an appropriate amount of time for somebody to find their routine, to stick to the routine, and when to change their routine?
Mm-hmm. I think it's just being intentional about establishing a routine. So like every week, I would say, going back and looking at, okay, like what was my routine this week? Like was it the same as last week? Did I change things up? Did I like what happened? Did I not like what happened? Do I feel like it's too strict? Do I feel like I don't have enough discipline with my routine? So it's really just building awareness around like what's working for you, what's not. And it morphs over time. But again, it's being aware of, okay, how is this thing helping me or not helping me, or what's coming up for me? Is it actually getting me into a state where I can perform at a high level or not? So,
sure. Now, what do you feel like is the biggest difference from the guys you work with in Division I baseball, and I know you work with softball as well, but I'm using baseball selfishly for this example. What's the biggest difference you see from guys that you work with in terms of separation between Division I baseball, minor league baseball, and then Major League Baseball? Like, where's the separation, right? Because, like, you have to have a certain skill level to play Division I baseball. You have to have a certain level of skill to get to professional baseball. And then, obviously, there's that next step of, well, they say the two toughest things are to make it to AA and to stay in the big leagues. But, like, there's that next level of getting to the big leagues. Like, where's the biggest advantage, or where's the separation on the mental side of things that you see between each of those levels?
The reason this question is hard is because, like, even at the pro level, they're just, a lot of them are like super blessed with, just like talent. Like they've thrown 95 since they were, in high school or something like that. So at every level, it's kind of the same issue, I would say, and it's really just a lack of self-awareness. Like the guys that perform, that are really good in high school, like they probably have more self-awareness, or they're just like naturally better than everybody else. Or same thing at college, same thing at the pro level. So I would say that like what separates you within the level that you're currently in is your self-awareness. Like, what am I thinking about when I'm doing these things? How can I, change my mindset so that I can get more out of myself? Well, I mean, one specific example I'm thinking of right now is like, I work with this kid in high school who his big goal this offseason is just to get bigger and hit the weight room, right? And so one thing we were talking about was he's like, yeah, as soon as I get to the fourth superset, like I'm exhausted. Like I don't want to do the fourth superset. And I rarely actually ever go through and do the fourth superset. And I'm like, okay, well, like literally your mind quits before your body quits. So like you're telling yourself that like, I can't finish this fourth superset. So next time you get into that situation, you get into the weight room and you're on that fourth superset, what's something you can tell yourself to make it through that? And he's like, I can do the fourth superset? I'm like, like literally, it's as simple as that sometimes. So again, it's like, first of all, he had to have the self-awareness and the courage the courage to be vulnerable with me in terms of the fact that, like, he's not finishing the fourth superset, and then go back and see, like, okay, what am I telling myself in those moments, and how can I change it to get more of the results that I want out of myself?
And I don't know about for you personally, but I always found that whatever I was thinking about manifests a lot of time. So like in my example that I always use is like dating back to college, it was, we can't walk the leadoff guy, right? We can't fall behind. We can't, right? So what happens? I throw ball one to the leadoff guy. Where does my head go? I can't walk this guy. 2-0, oh shoot. Like a little bit of panic button to where it's like anxiousness, and all of a sudden I'm fixated on it to where what happens? I walk the guy. And then what I started to realize the older I got, it was like those were all just made up things. And if I could just solely just be in the pitch that I am now, I had much better results, because what's already happened has happened, and what hasn't happened hasn't happened. So why am I already worried about something that hasn't happened or has already happened? I just need to be present now. And I felt like that was the biggest shift for me, was just getting to that mindset. But it took me a really long time. Unfortunately for Rick Heller, it was after college.
Yeah. I mean, I call that the don't zone and the do zone. So like, I can't walk this guy. Inherently, that's not a bad thought, quote unquote, but it's an unproductive one in that moment, because it's not helping you execute the next pitch. Now, if you would have noticed, like, I can't walk this guy, and then you stepped off and maybe hit a release, right, and got back to being like, all right, well, I can't walk this guy. Well, what do I need to do so I don't walk this guy? And it's like, all right, let's throw a fastball middle way right here. And then now you're back to a thought that is actually going to help you. And like, I heard this from Ian Iapoce, he was a hitting coach in the big leagues for a while. But he talks a lot about how, like, it's not the consistency of their swings or the consistency of their mechanics on the mound. It's the consistency of their thoughts. So if you have consistent thoughts up there that are leading to you executing the right way, like, you're probably going to be better than somebody who's thinking about different things all the time, or thinking about things that aren't productive, like, I can't walk this guy. So yeah, again, it's having the self-awareness to be like, I'm thinking about how I can't walk this guy. Okay, well, what do I need to be thinking about so that I don't walk this guy? Well, then, again, fastball middle away, fastball middle in, or for you, cut fastball.
Yeah.
So
one question I always have is, like, when do you feel like is an appropriate age for somebody, right? So like we always hear, don't throw a curveball till blah, blah, blah. When do you feel like an appropriate age to start working on the mental game? Because, like, as we know, like, children only have a certain amount of time frame. Adults only have a certain amount of mental energy that they can actually focus as well. Like, when do you feel like baseball players should actually start to take this seriously, and where they can apply it to their game?
I mean, I've worked with kids that are literally 5 years old. So, and I think actually kids, they figure this stuff out on their own, and then it's almost like they get it taught out of themselves as they get older.
Interesting.
I mean, I worked with this 9-year-old Max. Max, if you're watching, what's up, man?
Shout out, Max.
He's like 13 now.
So he can watch it.
Yeah. But so when I was working with Max, he was a soccer goalie. And I asked him a simple question. I just said, hey, when you lose focus out on the field, like, how do you refocus? Not having ever taught him anything about the mental game. He's like, oh, well, it's pretty easy, actually. I just run across, I touch the left goalpost, I go, I touch the right goalpost, I jump up, I touch the crossbar, I clap my hands, take a breath, and I tell myself, focus. And I'm like, my job, like, why are we working together? Like, yeah. That's literally what I teach people, And so now for him, it was more about just bringing the intentionality to that. But so again, like, these kids, they know what to do. It's just like, when they do the things that you're looking for, it's like really honing in on it and being like, that was awesome, like praising them for those sort of mental game things that they're already doing. Another one is, I mean, it goes back to routines. Like, there was one of my best friends, his kid is 5 years old in, Little League this year, and he showed him a video of Schwarber's routine. And then literally he took that routine and he brought it out onto the baseball field. You know, he gets in, he takes a breath, and he focuses on hitting a line drive right back up the middle. And so now that he has this routine, again, it's just like constantly praising him for it when he does it right, when he does the process the right way, and helping him understand that, like, the more you become better at the process of the game, you'll start to get more of the outcomes that you want.
So your thought is anytime, sooner the better, probably, and then being consistent with it.
Yeah. Oh, you were talking earlier when we were like, what are some things that, like, you know now, like, did you do them back then? I remember one time I was camping with my dad, and he was like, I mean, we were in the tent, you know, in the sleeping bags, and I was literally so cold. I was curled up in a ball, but my knees were kind of in his side. It was a small tent, so he wanted me to, like, straighten out, and he's like, lay straight, and I'm like, I can't, like, I'm so cold, and he sits me up. He's like, sit up, and he goes, take a deep breath, and I'm like, and he's like, you see that? He's like, you stop shivering. He's like, use your breath and go back to sleep. And so for the next, I don't even know how long it was, I just, like, sat there, like, taking deep breaths, and eventually fell back asleep. And the next day we talked about how, like, your breath is, like, a very powerful tool that you can use whenever you want. So again, like, I was super young at that time, and I didn't really understand fully what was going on, but, like, he was teaching me in that moment how to use my breath to help me get more out of what I wanted, which in that moment was to
Go to
control
sleep.
my body and go back to sleep.
He's trying to get you to go back to sleep.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it worked. So
let's talk about the breath briefly. You know, most people do know the more oxygen you have, the better it is for your brain, for your thoughts. Is that the only purpose for, you know, good breath work? Or, like, what are the other benefits that maybe people don't know about?
I mean, definitely nasal breathing is the biggest one, not being a mouth breather. Basically, being a mouth breather will just instantly make you more anxious. So really keeping your mouth shut when you're doing everything throughout your day. I'd say that's the biggest one that a lot of people don't understand. And if you have a deviated septum, go get that fixed. Or, like, literally any way that you can have a nice clear nasal passage, because nasal breathing is just so much healthier for you than anything else.
I've seen the things that you can tape over your mouth. I've debated it, but I'm like, I'm probably going to suffocate.
I mouth taped for like 3 months.
It actually worked?
It's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I rarely mouth breathe anymore, unless I'm doing, like, some crazy conditioning workout and I'm keeled over, you know, trying to catch my breath. That's about it.
Yeah, I want to say it was Andrew Huberman that talked on the Joe Rogan podcast, and, like, how important, I don't think it was actually Huberman, it was somebody else, but how important it is, and even, you know, like, the structure of your face and all these, it's crazy stuff. All right, now I want to make a pivot here in terms of when I was referencing kind of an exciting time for you. You know, right now we got the division series going on, and to be determined on the championship series in the big leagues. And you work with Sean Manaea, who we both played with in college. You had the opportunity to play with him 2 years longer than I did. I really want to hone in on kind of some of the things that you're doing specifically there, because there's been a transformation over the last couple of years. And certainly there's some things that on the physical side that he's done that has definitely helped his game. But I'm just, like, so curious, because I had the opportunity to watch him pitch here in Arizona about a month ago against the Diamondbacks. Pitched really well. We had a bloop and a blast there, a couple of blasts in the last inning, but phenomenal performance. And it's amazing to see, you know, again, I only played with him for a brief amount of time. And I just talked about this on LinkedIn, and I said he struggled. He really didn't struggle that much. He struggled in the first inning against Central Arkansas as a freshman, but to see how much he's grown up, but what I have seen is the biggest difference is, like, he is he's a vet, right? He's been doing it a while, so, like, there's some of that, but, like, I just sense a calmness in him, and I'm just really curious on what you guys have been working on, because clearly there's something that is working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of people think the mental game, like, there has to be something wrong with you in order to start working with a mental performance coach. And so, but that's not the case. I think a mental performance coach can help you really get clarity on who you are and like what your game is, and really just like help you talk through and work through things so that like you can come up with more strategies moving forward based off of what's going on with you like in the moment, you know. So I think that like clarity and just building that awareness around your game, like a good mental performance coach will hopefully be asking you questions that makes you think about, you know, your past performances or maybe your future performances, because obviously they're not out there with you in the moment doing it, but really just building awareness around your game. And so like with Manaea, that's really the biggest thing. Like we talk the day before his starts and the day after his starts. And so like before his starts, it's like, okay, like what's our plan for tomorrow? Like what's going on for you? How are the last few days? You know, and really, again, just like bringing awareness to that plan so that he has clarity before he goes in and pitches, instead of it being like, okay, what am I going to do tomorrow? Like I have no idea. And then after the game, it's going back and looking at the game and saying, okay, like what were some thoughts that came up for you? Like say, I mean, obviously this year he's been having a really good year, so like we really don't talk about a whole bunch after the game. But it's just going back to certain moments and being like, okay, in this moment, what happened for you? Like, here's what I'm seeing from like a routine. Like, what were you thinking about there? You know, like when he goes through, he has his routine and his release down. Like, you'll see him every time before he gets on. He'll come set, get the sign, take a breath. There's actually a really cool video from this past time when he played for the Phillies. He walks the two guys. I think, what inning was that? Like the sixth inning, the one where he had the double play. And he walks a couple of guys, and then he like hits a release, and then the coach wound up coming out as well. And then next thing you know, I think he goes like strikeout, double play, or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah, Harper struck out Harper,
3 straight pitches,
and then got the double play ball off Castellanos. And so it was like, but he was like using his release there, and so like it's going back and asking him like, all right, like what were you thinking about there? And most of the time, when he's locked in, and you talk about this maturity aspect, it's not like, oh man, like I hope I don't give up a double here, or like, oh man, I hope I don't like throw it down the middle and he hits a home run. That was like old Manaea, like a few years ago. And now it's like, okay, like what do I have to do here to get out of this inning? And most of the time it comes back to just, all right, fastball's up and ripping his changeup. I mean, he's got great stuff. So, and everybody knows he's got, like, he's in like the 97th percentile or something like that for like fastballs at the top of the zone. So, yeah, like it really comes back to like, what's my plan? And then the maturity aspect is really just understanding that like thoughts are just thoughts at the end of the day, and it's being aware of them and knowing how to reframe and replace ones that aren't helping you so that you can get back to thinking productively out there on the mound.
That's super interesting. You know, you talk about the release, because that's a huge moment, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, a pivotal moment in the game. And, you know, if you, again, start getting those negative thoughts, it's so easy, especially when you have, 47,000 fans, I think?
Yeah. Well, that's actually one thing we talked about, too, was like your voice inside your head has to be louder than the voices around you. Like, I mean, before we got on, I was telling you about like being up in Milwaukee watching that third game, and it was so loud you literally could not hear yourself think. The floor was shaking from everybody going absolutely crazy. And so it's being able to have the really the self-discipline to stay thinking about what you need to be thinking about and continue to talk to yourself and, you know, like yell at yourself in your head if you need to hear yourself and be like, all right, we're going to throw a fastball at the top of the zone right here. Or, all right, we're going to throw a breakout or a breaking slider away right here, whatever it might be.
I think what's been so impressive about this postseason in particular for him is that, and he's even shared like his previous postseasons, he's had some struggles. And I would argue that New York is one of the toughest places to pitch for as an organization, because their fans are very loyal and they are hard on their players from the standpoint of like, if you're their guy, they love you. Mm-hmm. But if you struggle, right, you're going to hear about it. And I think like, yes, he pitched at home the other night, but there's just as much pressure, I feel like, at home there as there could be on the road. Now, would I rather pitch in Philadelphia or New York? Obviously, I would rather pitch in New York.
Well, I got a good story about that. So the first series against the Yankees was at the Yankee Stadium. Was it at home? I actually can't remember. But whenever the first series was against the Yankees this year, we're talking about the game, and he's like, dude, it's crazy. He's like arbitrary numbers, like maybe there's like 20 newspaper reporters in here. He's like, we have like over 100 right now, like for this series. Like you can just tell it's a huge series. Everybody cares about it. The whole city of New York is watching, and so like, yeah, there is that pressure there, that perceived pressure. And so it was being able to like talk through that and work through that and then come out on the other end and be like, okay, well, like what is important going into this game, like what is actually important that you can control, because you can't control the reporters, you can't control what people are saying, but you can control how you're thinking and what you're doing out there. So like, what's the plan? And then that's where, it comes back to his basically pitching plan while on the mound, things that he can control, his routines.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask is you keep referencing this plan. So it's not more or less, I'm sure some of it does coincide with the actual pitching plan. But like when you say plan, like what are the things that you're talking about? So, hey, let's say San Diego's the team that makes it out of this thing, and he's pitching one of the games. So when you're talking about a plan, what sort of things are you talking to him about in reference to that?
I would say that it's like the actual pitching plan.
Okay,
like what he's
so
going
it
to
is.
do.
Okay.
Yeah. There's other routines that go into it as well. Like you have your pitch-to-pitch routine that we talked about. Then you have your sort of inning-to-inning routine as a pitcher, and you have your game-to-games routine. Depending on if you're a pitcher or a hitter, obviously it's different. But like, so one thing that he does like before every inning is he'll like put his hat on and he'll tell himself, all right, like be relentless right here. So the physical action again of putting on the hat is linked to what he's mentally telling himself, be relentless. And so it's like that is a routine that you're using to help you get into like the mindset that you need to be in order to go out there and perform. And I mean, like there's other, like a shortstop I work with that plays at Harvard. She tells herself like, all right, like I'm the best athlete on this field. Like I make every play. And that's what she tells herself right before she walks out onto the diamond every time.
So 50,000 fans, just gave up two runs. It's the sixth inning. How do you allow your voice to be louder than the voices or the crowd that you hear? Like you said that, but how does one go through that process?
I mean,
you're probably going to say routine, but
no.
But I'm trying to wrap my brain around that because I played with guys that played in winter ball, and they literally said like, I've never experienced it before, but like my legs were shaking, and he's like, I couldn't hear myself think because it was that loud. Like, how do you get there?
It's a skill, just like anything else. And so the acronym that I talk about is CAR, C-A-R, and it stands for catch, admit, replace. So that would be for unproductive thoughts. Productive ones would be like catch, admit, and run with it. So like if you catch yourself thinking about what you need to be doing, then it's like you don't want to replace that. You want to keep running with that one. Whereas if you notice yourself thinking about, oh my gosh, it's so loud in here. Oh my gosh, my legs are shaking, right? Then hopefully you're being like, okay, like my legs are shaking, right? You're bringing awareness to it, and then it's like, all right, well, what do I need to focus on in order to execute this next pitch? And yes, when you first start getting into that, there's usually a lot of things that you aren't aware of that are taking you off track and distracting you. But the more you work on it and the more you become aware of the different things that got you distracted, then all of a sudden it becomes a lot easier. And you're like, oh, okay, like I've been here before. Like the umpire called a ball on me. That might have taken me off track in the past, but now it's like I know how to deal with that. And so a lot of it's like post-game, you're going back and you're saying like, all right, like what were some distracting thoughts that took me away from wanting to execute the next pitch or thinking about executing the next pitch? And then from there, it's like, okay, well, like if that pops up again, what can I tell myself in that moment? So that's like the dirty work. That's the work that like nobody really wants to do, which is, again, why a mental performance coach would come into handy, is because, that's like dedicated time to understanding those distracting thoughts and being able to come up with a plan for the next time they come up. Which most of the time it doesn't pop up again, or like it becomes easier to deal with it moving forward.
So do you feel like these are things, so you have those conversations post, right? Let's say there was an inning and hey, I recognize this. Are those things that are worked on between days 1 and 5 in terms of like I'm a starting pitcher in the big leagues, or is that like, hey, next time you're out?
That's definitely worked on like right afterwards, because it's a lot harder to go back a month ago and think like, what was I even thinking about a month ago?
Sure.
You know, so like at least I would say weekly. Another guy I work with, for instance, he plays AAA for the Rays. Like he noticed that when he was out there, he came out and he was only throwing like 93 that day, where he normally sits like 96. And so he looked up at the scoreboard and he's like, oh man, like I'm only throwing 93 today. So then he's like up there trying to like throw it harder, you know?
Yeah.
And so that was just like a distraction. Instead of being like, oh, I'm only throwing 93 today, like, all right, well, like, let's, you know, use the cards that I was dealt to dominate as best I can. You know, he was like trying to throw harder instead of trying to just execute better. And so after the game, we went back and we were like, okay, well, like, what's going to happen next time you come out throwing 92, 94 instead of 94, 96? And he was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And then sure enough, like 2 weeks later, same thing happened. And he's like, all right, well, like, don't got 96 in me today. So like, let's just dominate with what I do have, you know, and he did great. So
that's where I think the mental game is so big, because one of my favorite pitching coaches, J.R. Purdue, his mentor was Leo Mazzoni, and they talked about, you know, there's going to be 15% of your starts, you're going to have everything, right? Like you're in the zone, you're locked in, all your pitches are working. You're going to have 15% of those starts where you have nothing. And there's about 70% of those starts where you have some stuff and you don't have some stuff, but it's like, it's how you compete, right, in those starts where you may not have your stuff, or you have some of your stuff where you can really, you know, I feel like separate yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's where it's like, that's where I feel like the tough part about the mental game is when things are good, like it's kind of similar in the standpoint of seeing somebody for mental health. Hey, I'm good, I don't need you. So like, is it the same way? Do you feel like in the mental performance game, like if somebody's on this track, is this something that they should be consistently doing, or if things are good, like I'm good?
Mm-hmm. No, I think they should definitely like keep up with it.
So you feel like it's just as important as their physical training, as their eating habits, as their sleeping habits. Like you feel like that is just as important.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you know, like they might have a couple weeks, a month, maybe a couple months where they're just like killing it and going off, right? But then there's always something that pops up. And so it's like having someone there. And so like if you're consistently keeping up with them, then again, that's like you're on a routine with them, right? And so it's like sometimes you get on, maybe you don't have much to talk about. And then other times you get on, you have a lot to talk about. But it's like that consistency going in. Like going back to Manaea, like I think he had like 8 starts in a row or something like that, where he pitched 6 2/3 or more, 6 1/3 or more for like 8 starts, which was like nobody else in the bigs had done that this year. And then his last game of the season, he has like a little bit of a hiccup. And so it's like we had been talking all the time up until that start. And so even though he was killing it, we were still chatting. So then when he has that, it's like now you have that trust and that relationship built, instead of like being like, oh man, like I need to talk to this guy, right? Like, or whoever
out of a need versus a, you know, necessity.
It's like
of
this
the
is just
overall,
what we do. Yeah, it's less emotional. It's more you're going in and you're being more objective about it. It's like, you know, you have kind of the questions that you're always asking and just building awareness around, and then like sometimes your answer is the same, and then sometimes something took you off, and it's being able to notice that then, and then be able to get back to, okay, like what do we need to focus on here?
So if the mental game is just as important as all other aspects of, you know, anything, I was always in the off season trying to do something in terms of like, okay, next year I want to try to see if I can develop this better. What can, like, you know, I know the off season's not here yet, but like, is there things that like players can do in the off season to work on their mental game when they're not on the baseball field, when they're not, you know, taking those reps, right? Because most guys are going to probably put the ball and glove away. I don't know what organizations are telling guys anymore, but it was usually at least a month, 2 months. So
You still have time though, like preseason, because you're not just showing up to spring training
for sure.
having never thrown.
But
off
in that
a
off
mound yet.
season, like, so they have 4 or 5 months. Like, is that a time where they can try to, like, hey, I did this really well and implement it in bullpens, or like, is that stuff that they can do in the off season as well?
Yeah, I mean, at least with my pro clients and even the college guys I work with, like, there are a couple months where like we don't talk in the off season,
And it's probably good
they're
for
not doing
everybody.
anything. Yeah.
Because it's
like, what do you want to talk about? I'm literally doing the exact same thing I was doing last week,
Sure.
which is basically just going in and working out every day. You know, like you're not really throwing bullpens yet. You're not really hitting off live pitchers. So, like, there's just not much to talk about, honestly.
Yeah.
But like, I would say recapping the year is huge, and then figuring out a plan for the off season.
Sure.
Right, and then once you get going again, like with bullpens and actually hitting off live pitching and stuff like that,
Sure.
then from there, it's probably like meeting up with somebody.
So you mentioned recapping the year. I'm just kind of curious, like, what did that recap look like last year at the completion of the season for Sean? Because, like, this has been a career year, right? So, like, there's been a significant difference. So, like, what was that recap, and what were the small things that you feel like, you know, were a big separator for him this year?
Literally the unproductive thoughts and that CAR acronym I was talking about, like catch, emit, replace. Like, last year was like, I would say, just like the gauntlet for him in terms of like catching thoughts and replacing them, right? And like, he had one start where he actually got hit with a line drive, and afterwards I like checked in on him and I was like, yo, like, how you doing? Like, because he got hit with a line drive, and he goes, physically I'm actually fine. Mentally I feel like I'm all over the place right now. So I had him like write down all of his thoughts, and then there were like 27 of them, and it was crazy.
27, that's a lot.
Yeah, it was like crazy to, and I'm like, how long have you been dealing with this stuff? He's like, my whole career. And I'm like, holy, like, that's insane that you're still pitching at the big league level. Like, that just goes to show how like good he actually is, you know. And so we worked through those. It took like about like 3-4 weeks for like that new way of thinking to really take hold. And then, yeah, I think from like May 17th on or something, last year, he was like one of the top 5 pitchers in baseball, according to some stats. So like, yeah, but like that was all like just becoming better at that skill of like keeping your mindset in check while you're out there. And now this year, like, you're seeing basically the fruits of his labor from last year, I would say, because like, I mean, basically like right from the beginning, he like kind of, he didn't start out super great, you know, but like he just kept going upwards, based off of, you know, last year's work that we put in, and then continuing to put in the work this year with like his mindset, and again, like dealing with those unproductive thoughts and shifting them towards more productive ones.
So maybe that list is still 27, but instead of allowing it to sit up there, he's now recognizing that that's just a thought, and that's okay to have that thought, but I'm going to just let that hit my head and maybe go out? Or is that list gone from 27 to 5?
It's definitely shrunk way down. And this is what I tell athletes that I start working with all the time, is like when you first get into the mental game, and you kind of have this like explosion of awareness. And so you start to notice all the thoughts that are like taking you off and distracting you. And so it's, again, bringing awareness to those things. And it might be like a lot of things that are distracting you. And then over time, it gets shorter and shorter and shorter. And then your list of productive ones grows as well. So yeah, it's like, it is kind of like with the mental game, super simple. It's like all you have to do is think about that one thing you need to be thinking about to execute the next pitch or the next swing. It's the distractions that really make it hard, and becoming aware of the distractions.
It's a super simple game, and I think that baseball players tend to overcomplicate things, right? Like,
I don't think it's not baseball players. It's people in general.
General population, probably outside of baseball too.
Yeah.
Just like overthinking everything.
And if we were to get like philosophical about it, I think like understanding that your brain is just a thought factory, like it's just a tool that you're using to experience life, like, and you have this higher consciousness that can decide like what I'm going to think about, what I'm going to focus on, and then training that ability. Really, like, that's the separator between elite athletes, elite business people, and those people that are maybe lower on the totem pole and like working their way up.
For sure. I have two last questions here. And I asked you this last time, so I have a second opportunity. I don't know if you remember this question. And I ask every guest this. I act like I have like a long list. I guess you're my third guest here, so like you're the second person that I've asked. But what is the best investment that one person can make? Doesn't need to be an actual monetary investment, but what's the best investment somebody can make?
What's the best investment?
I remember your answer last time, so I'm kind of curious to see if you've changed the answer here.
Oh man, I don't necessarily remember my answer from last time, so this will be maybe new, maybe not. But the best investment you can make, I mean, the first thing that's popping in my head is like definitely investing in yourself. So
that's what it was.
Like, okay, nice.
Yes.
But yeah, like investing in yourself and like continuing to get better in the things that you deem important in your life. So whatever that might be, you know, like for me, like an investment in myself and from a business standpoint, right now is like I just paid like literally thousands of dollars to go to this mental performance clinic here in November, and so it's like just continuing to do that and using your I guess income to like consistently upgrade your life and like do the things that you want to do out there.
Sure.
That's what it really comes back to. Like, what do you really want out of your life? And then what do I need to do to get more out of that area?
Yeah.
You know, or like same thing, like I love to travel. So like on Amazon Prime Day, like if you looked at my cart, like it was all basically like travel
How many
stuff.
Amazon Prime Days are there now?
I don't know, but mine fell on my birthday, so that's
many.
why I was on top of that one.
Too many.
Yeah, like definitely investing in yourself. So if that means, you know, like you want to get better at your nutrition, like hire a nutrition coach or like download an app, you know, like you don't even have to spend money to invest in yourself. Like there's so many free things that you can do out there. Like go to the library, go on YouTube, YouTube University, you know. Like,
how to podcast.
yeah, exactly. Like you don't need to even like spend money, but it's again like, where am I at? Sitting down, building clarity with yourself, and then coming up with a plan. Like discipline is having a plan and sticking to it. So it's like, and like you need discipline in your life in order to like become good at anything, or even to just like be a fulfilled individual. Like you need to be disciplined in one area of your life in order to do that. Even the most laid back, chill dudes that are killing it, like they might not necessarily seem disciplined, but there is an aspect of discipline in their life. You know, like even like, I don't know, like the surfer bro image is coming to mind, right? But like even for them to be good at surfing, they need to be disciplined with it. So
I think, you know, Goggins, I always go back to Goggins, but like he talks about like doing the things every day that you don't want to do, like takes a tremendous amount of discipline. Like he hates running, and he's like, that's why I do it. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like just to continue to do something you don't want to do day in and day out, knowing that eventually it's going to pay off.
Yeah, there's this inner drive inside of us called like performance necessity. It's basically like an emotion, but it's like when you figure out what you really want, then you start to understand that like, okay, I need to do certain things in order to get what I want. So like, what are the things I need to do to get there? And then it's like your emotions really don't come into play at all then, because it's like, oh, like whether I'm feeling like crap or I'm feeling great, like I need to do this. It's kind of like, what do I really want? I want, you know, you have a child. I want my child to be healthy and like live a productive life in the future. So like there are certain things you need to do in order to get her there. Like, and if that means, you know, a sleepless night, that means a sleepless night. If that means pushing a podcast back to the afternoon, that means that as well, which is what happened today.
Whoops. Last question. Where can people find you?
So you can find me on... well, first of all, you could just call me or text me, 847-922-1371.
You need like the Empire glass.
Oh, yeah.
200-300 Empire. You need that, like some sort of jingle on that.
I need a jingle, man. We got to come up with one. So, yeah, 847-922-1371.
I think in sales, you have to say it 3 times in order for people to get it. So.
Okay, so yeah, 847-922-1371. Or you could email me, Tyler@PazikPerformanceGroup.com, or go on the website, PazikPerformanceGroup.com, and check me out some more.
How do people see you on social? Because you're on social, right?
Social, yeah, Instagram, Twitter.
That's your big one. So where do people
Instagram
find you?
Yeah, Instagram's the main one. on Twitter and Facebook as well, but on Instagram it's just Pazik Performance Group, P-A-Z-I-K.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you joining me for the second time, and hopefully this one we captured the actual video itself, but super excited for where you are in your career and the things that you're doing, and super excited to see what the next few weeks are in store, and see if we can see a former teammate of both of ours win a freaking championship. Would be really sweet. But I really appreciate the time you joined me here today.
Yeah, no problem, man.
Thanks.
Any opinions are those of Jason Van Skyke, financial advisor, and not necessarily those of Raymond James. Any information is not a complete summary or statement of all available data necessary for making an investment decision and does not constitute a recommendation. Expressions of opinion are as of this date and are subject to change without notice. This information is not intended as a solicitation or an offer to buy or sell any security referred to herein. Investments mentioned may not be suitable for all investors. There is no guarantee that these statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance may not be indicative of future results. Investing involves risk, and you may incur a profit or loss regardless of strategy selected. Indices are not available for direct investment. Any investor who attempts to mimic the performance of an index would incur fees and expenses which would reduce returns. International Headquarters: the Raymond James Financial Center, 880, Carillon Parkway, St. Petersburg, FL 337, 16-800-0248-863, RaymondJames.com, copyright 2024. Raymond James and Associates Inc. member, New York Stock Exchange, SIPC, copyright 2023. Raymond James Financial Services, Inc. member, FINRA/SIPC. Raymond James is a registered trademark of Raymond James Financial Inc. Investment products are not deposits, not FDIC, NCUA insured, not insured by any government agency, not bank guaranteed, subject to risk and may lose value.